What's up, YouTube? It's me again, and my bio plants class is actually having a competition, and the person who has the biggest plant wins. Second biggest plant gets second place, but then there's a separate competition for best display. And I don't know if you've been keeping up with my YouTube channel, but there goes my little calanchoe I've been trying to grow for an entire semester. So obviously, I am not getting biggest plant, but I can get best display. So what I'm going to do here today is show you guys how I'm going to build this. I'm going to put the calanchoe plant in here. It's a succulent, so I wish it weren't a succulent. I wish it were a plant that could use some humidity, because I would kill that. But yeah, it's a succulent, so I'm going to put it up here in the wine glass, and then I'm going to turn this into an aquarium. And I'm probably going to take some crypts you can see right here on the very front of this tank and put them in here. And I'm going to set the whole thing in the windowsill, and hopefully it'll all look amazing. So the rocks that I'm going to use are these rocks I picked up from Petco. Honestly, whatever you put in here is completely up to you if you want to recreate this, but the most important pieces are this glass bowl, this wine glass, whatever decor you want to use. But I also used aquarium silicone sealant to kind of glue this wine glass down so that it wouldn't move. I tried to make sure that it was centered. And of course, you're going to need whatever plant you want to put up top and whatever fish you're going to put down the bottom. For this display, I'm going to use Endler's live bears, probably just the males, and maybe some cherry shrimp. So now I'm going to go ahead and time lapse the rest of this build to show you guys what I'm going to do. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is deal with this calanchoe plant. So you can see here it's growing as best it can. It's been doing its best, but it's a succulent, so the soil needs a lot more drainage than I've been giving it. It was not put in cactus potting mix, which it should have been, so now I'm going to try to fix that. And how I'm going to fix that before I actually start here is with some sand and some aquarium gravel. And the aquarium gravel isn't in the shot yet, but it will be later during the time-lapse portion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix the soil that it's in right now with a little bit of sand and a little bit of gravel in this container right here. And hopefully that'll allow the soil to drain a lot more easily and allow the water to go through so that the plant isn't waterlogged for any extended period of time. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so the next part is going to be to put this in here, followed by our little plantlet. So to show you guys what I did before, although it's pretty self-explanatory, I'll do a little bit more because I'm realizing now that I might not have as much soil as I expected to. So a little bit of sand in there, and what this does is it allows the water to drain. Now normally I would use something like gravel. I say normally as though this is my first time doing this, but from my research I found that I should probably use gravel for this, and a bit of a mesh of some sort so that the water can seep through. And because gravel is bigger, there's a lot more area for the water to seep into, and it's more efficient at getting the water to evaporate back out. However, being a college student, I don't have access to the mesh that I need. So although I have the gravel, I'm going to use sand, because if I use gravel without a mesh, the soil and the gravel would mix together, but with sand, the substrate is going to stay on top. So now I'm going to go ahead and probably speed through this part. Yeah, I'm probably going to speed through this part. So here's the next part. Now, because this is my first time doing a project like this, because hindsight is always 20/20, what I would recommend you guys do if you are to recreate this is to put some sort of plastic or saran wrap would be perfect to put over this so that you don't end up with the soil in what will soon be the water column, which I'm going to have to deal with. So I guess I'll do that right now. Okay, so I dealt with the problem as best I could. And now comes the next most important part, and probably the most fun part. So the rock that you see in there now, I actually put in before this wine glass was cured to the glass bowl. So make sure that when you recreate this project, you get the major rocks, the major stones, or the major decor into the bowl before this cures, or like really before you glue this down. But because the rock sits on top of the base of the wine glass, you're going to want to get it in before it cures. You're going to apply the sealant onto the bottom of the wine glass or the bottom of the bowl, place the wine glass, and then move the wine glass around to squeeze your rocks in prior. So now comes the actual scaping. I'm going to time lapse this all. Okay, so with this scape, I used most of the rocks / rock chips. Now this rock, unfortunately, is just too big for me to incorporate into the scape. I wish that I could, but alas, I opted for the smaller bowl and wine glass. Just because I didn't want to dwarf my plant, and because I felt like this would be easier to find a place to display in a windowsill, because I'll talk about that later. And then also I kept some of these rock chips to keep for later on when I actually finish the scape and finalize the scape, because I'm going to actually plant this, and then I'm going to place these rock chips down here. Just sprinkle them around after I've already placed the plants, because once I agitate the sand to place the plants, and then once I add the water, these rock chips would get buried and lost in the sand like that. So I wanted to make sure that I left some for the final touches. And same with my gravel. This is the kind of gravel that I'm using. I don't know if you can actually see it. It's the kind of gravel that I'm using. This is really pretty gravel. I'm not sure if I'm going to actually use it to scape the bowl yet, but I probably will. So just keep that in mind. You want to have some excess materials left over at all times, because you never know what you're going to need to finalize and put the finishing touches on your bowl. Alright, so now comes the next step, and that is the water. I misspoke because we forgot about our little friend sitting here on the table. He's definitely the next step, and really the reason we're making this. So I'm going to go ahead and add him now. So now I'm going to take an opportunity to show you what's going on with this scape before I add the water and make it really kind of permanent / finished. This is what's going on up top. This is the kalanchoe, the rocks. You can see like the gravel and the sand mixed into here. I'm not honestly sure what kind of substrate this was beforehand, but I know that now it does have a decent amount of sand and gravel, so it should be a lot healthier for this young plant. And then you can see the sand layer at the bottom, which is going to allow water to drain out of here and make sure that the roots of this little succulent don't stay moist and don't rot, etc. And you can see the rock scape that I did here. And the purpose of this, or I guess the thought behind this, was to make sure that it was viewable from all angles. So I didn't want to make it too symmetrical to this, to that. I wanted to make it look as natural as possible. And in nature, things are pretty random. I did leave this area right at the base of the wine glass pretty open, because that's where I plan to put the crypts. I want it to be kind of like in that central area, kind of branching out. And I want the light to come from this side. This is not the front of the display, because of course that's the part that's facing the window and that people can't really see. But ultimately, it's still meant to be viewed from all sides, and I think it looks pretty good from all sides. You see two rocks here. As you move around, you see just basically different scapes from every angle. So I really like that about this, and I think that I got really lucky with this really pretty rock, and this rock that contrasts really nicely both with the white sand and with a darker substrate. Okay, so this part is not going to be fun. This is actually the time to add water, and what most of you guys are going to do is add water and then add the chlorinator. So water from the tap or the hose and then add the chlorinator. What I'm going to do, because I have an established aquarium right there, is I'm going to add water from that aquarium to here. It's going to do two things, actually three things. One, of course, it's going to be the right temperature. Two, it's going to be bioactive, which means it's probably going to have some beneficial bacteria in it. And what beneficial bacteria does, I shouldn't try to explain the entire nitrogen cycle, but basically what that bacteria does is it breaks down bad stuff and turns it into compounds that the plants can use. And also what this water is just really convenient right now. So what it's going to do, unfortunately, because I have dry sand, is it's going to mix this sand up. And it might mess up my Scape a little bit, my display. We'll see what happens. The reason I use dry sand, though, as opposed to washing and wetting the sand before I added it, is just because I wanted to get a clear idea of what the Scape's going to look like once it's actually submerged underwater. So, yeah, this part will not be fun. And, of course, I'm going to time-lapse through this. But, yeah, you can use dry sand or wet sand when you do your display. Wet sand is going to not allow you to have as clear an idea of what it's going to look like when it's finished, because the sand's going to stick to everything from the sides of the glass to the actual rocks. But on the bright side, you won't have to deal with what I'm about to deal with right now, which is floating sand particles, sand dust everywhere, etc. So here goes. Alright, so there were some technical difficulties, but I'm in the process of the first cleaning. So I ended up actually removing the rocks, not removing them entirely, but just putting them behind that big mother or father stone, whichever one you want to call it. And this is all aquarium water, and I'm just stirring up the gravel, the sand rather, and making sure that all the bubbles underneath the sand are getting out. I'm making sure that all the sand gets waterlogged. And that the water is really mixing in with the sand and really cleaning the sand. So this is going to be a tedious process. I'm probably going to fill it up and drain it maybe 2 or 3 more times just to make sure that I really get everything out, all the bad stuff out, all the dust and soil particles out of the water. Make sure that this is the best possible Scape it can be. And in the process, I'm going to give my 55-gallon a water change, which I'm sure that the fish will not object to. So, here goes. So I decided I'm going to go ahead and add the plants today. I just walked this tank back from the Murray house to my dorm, and I added water from Flower's tank. I'm going to go ahead and add some crypts that I took out of the 20-gallon on my desk, as you can see it. I took 2 of the crypts that were in kind of a bad place, a bad position, so they're not getting a lot of light in the tank as is. Ooh, excuse that. So yeah, I decided to go ahead and add them to this setup, and hopefully they'll do a lot better. And there was one of the plants that just never really took root in the substrate. Its base was above the sand level. So I'm going to add those to this right now, and I'm probably going to time lapse that. Now this tank is pretty much ready to be added to the windowsill. It is completely planted. I think this is all the plants that I'm going to add, at least for the foreseeable future, to this system. I'm going to eventually add some root tabs, probably just 1 root tab to the substrate, just to make sure that the crypts have a nice nutrient-rich layer to feed from, because they're going to have an excess of light, and they're probably going to have adequate CO2, but if I feel like they don't, I'm going to add some, come on camera, CO2 booster, which you can see up there. So the system's going to have more than enough light, more than enough nutrition, and I'm going to have some probably mono shrimp taking care of any algae issues that I might encounter. So yeah, that's what's going on here. Thanks for watching. Remember, fish keeping is not a science, it's an art. Take care.